At the family picnic that summer afternoon in Ohio, the air was thick with the smell of charcoal and sizzling hot dogs, children's laughter cutting through the drone of cicadas, and the bright sun making the grass glisten as though the whole yard had been polished for the occasion. I sat cross-legged on a faded checkered blanket, my daughter Maya tucked against my side, her tiny fingers clinging to the hem of my yellow sundress as she nibbled at a piece of corn on the cob. To anyone glancing across the yard, we looked like the perfect picture of a family enjoying a harmless day together. But underneath my smile, there was a dull ache, the kind you carry when you know you are tolerated, not celebrated. I was used to the way my relatives looked at me, their polite nods, their shallow questions, their quick glances over my shoulder, as though searching for someone more interesting. I had endured it for years, the subtle digs, the comparisons, the constant reminder that I was never enough. And at the center of it all was my Aunt Lorraine, my mother's older sister, the woman who had perfected cruelty, dressed as composure. She was across the lawn now in her pressed white blouse and gold necklace, her manicured hands holding the leash of her hulking Rottweiler Brutus. He sat obediently by her side, muscles tense, his glossy black coat shimmering under the sun, his eyes fixed on me in a way that sent a ripple of unease through my chest. Lorraine saw my glance and smiled faintly, that practiced smile that made strangers think she was refined, but made me feel like prey. When she spoke, her voice was smooth, but carried a razor edge that only I seemed to hear. "Family time is precious, isn't it, Claire?" She called out, her words slicing through the cheerful chatter. My mother, Margaret, gave her a quick look, half disapproving, half weary, as though she had no energy left to challenge her sister. I gave a small nod, pressing Maya closer, murmuring to her to finish her food. I wanted the day to pass without incident. I wanted peace, though deep down I knew peace was never in Lorraine's vocabulary. The moment shifted so quickly, it barely registered at first. 1 second I was reaching for Maya's juice box. The next, there was a sharp snap of leather releasing, and Brutus surged forward, paws pounding against the earth, his massive body blurring with terrifying speed. For a heartbeat, the sound seemed muted. The pop of soda cans, the distant crack of a baseball bat from kids playing down the street, the rustle of wind through the trees. And then her voice cut through, chilling and deliberate, "Get her!" I froze, disbelieving what I had just heard. The words didn't sound accidental. They sounded rehearse-planned venom rolled into command. My pulse spiked, but by the time my mind caught up, Brutus was already on me. His weight slammed into my chest, knocking me backward onto the blanket. Maya screamed her high-pitched cry, shattering the air as the dog's jaws clamped down on my arm. Pain exploded white-hot and jagged, ripping through bone and muscle as though his teeth were knives. My scream ripped from my throat, raw and primal, the kind that made people drop plates and turn their heads in horror. Blood welled instantly, hot and slick, spilling down my arm, soaking into the yellow fabric of my dress, painting the grass in thick streaks of red. My father Daniel, once a soldier, barked orders instinctively, his chair clattering behind him as he lunged forward. My mother's hands flew to her mouth, her face pale, trembling as she fumbled with her phone, shrieking for an ambulance, words breaking between sobs. Around us, chaos erupted. Cousins shrieked, scattering like startled birds. My Uncle Frank pulled children toward the house, shielding their eyes. Yet in the middle of the madness, Lorraine stood calm, her arms folded across her chest, her lips curled into something that wasn't panic, but satisfaction. Her eyes met mine as I writhed under the crushing weight of Brutus, my blood staining his muzzle, his growl vibrating through my bones. And she smiled. That smile was worse than the bite, because it told me this was no accident. It told me this moment had been chosen, staged, executed. I tried to shove the dog off, but my strength was nothing compared to his bulk. Every tug of his jaw sent another bolt of agony tearing through my arm. I tasted iron on my tongue, realized it was my own blood dripping from my bitten lip as I screamed again. My little girl's voice rose above it all, calling Mommy from just feet away, her face twisted in terror. I stretched my free hand toward her, desperate to pull her back. But the dog's weight pinned me. Somebody help her! Aunt Margaret screamed, her voice breaking as she stumbled toward me, only for another relative to grab her arm, terrified she'd be attacked too. My father roared, grabbing the nearest chair and swinging it down onto Brutus's back with the force of a man fighting for his daughter's life. The crack echoed, the dog yelped, but didn't release his jaws, locked tight, blood frothing around his teeth. I thought this was it, that my life would drain out onto the grass in front of everyone I loved, that my daughter would be left with the memory of her mother torn apart at a picnic. And then, over the roar of chaos, I heard Lorraine again, her tone so low only I could catch it. "You were warned, Claire." The words froze me even as pain seared every nerve. She had wanted this, she had waited for this. This was not a slip, not a moment of bad judgment. It was the culmination of years of her contempt sharpened into one command. My vision blurred at the edges, dizziness threatening to swallow me, but a fierce surge of survival jolted through me. I screamed for Maya to run to go to Grandpa. She bolted into my father's arms just as he slammed the chair down again, this time with a force that jarred Brutus enough for his teeth to wrench free tearing flesh as they released. Blood poured hot and relentless, my arm burning as though on fire. My father tackled the dog, his muscles straining, veins bulging as he forced it down his voice, a guttural growl to match the beast's. The picnic, once filled with laughter, now stank of blood and fear. Plates were overturned, drinks spilled. Children sobbed from the porch. And through it all, Lorraine remained composed, almost regal, her fingers brushing her necklace, her chin lifted. When I locked eyes with her, desperate for an answer, desperate for any shred of humanity, she tilted her head and whispered with that same cold smile, "It's only the beginning." My stomach turned, the blood soaking my yellow sundress, spreading like spilled paint across summer's canvas, and the crowd around me froze, some clutching their phones instead of reaching for me. In that instant, I understood Lorraine hadn't just wanted to scare me. She had unleashed something calculated, something designed to erase me in front of my child. And as Maya's terrified scream tore through the air, I realized the attack was not the end, but the opening shot of a war my own family had chosen. Screams tore through the picnic grounds as Brutus writhed under my father's grip, his jaws snapping his body, a thrashing mass of muscle and fury. My arm throbbed slick with blood, every heartbeat sending a new wave of agony ripping through me. I pressed my other hand hard against the wounds, but it felt useless, the blood surging too quickly, dripping down onto the grass until the earth itself seemed to drink it in. The yellow sundress I had chosen that morning, thinking it would be light and cheerful, was now ruined, stained crimson, and clinging to my skin. Maya clutched at my father's legs, sobbing uncontrollably as he wrestled with the animal veins bulging in his neck, his military training the only thing keeping the beast from lunging again. My mother shouted into the phone, her voice ragged and high-pitched as she screamed at the emergency dispatcher, repeating over and over that her daughter was being mauled by a dog, that blood was everywhere, that an ambulance had to come now, not later. Around us, family members spun into chaos. Cousins cried, their little hands clamped over their ears. My Aunt Margaret shrieked at Lorraine, "What is wrong with you? Are you insane?" Her husband grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back, his eyes wide with the kind of terror men get when they realize violence has broken out and they have no control over it. But Lorraine stood apart from it all, not flustered, not apologetic. Her eyes stayed locked on me, calm and calculating, her arms folded tightly across her chest. I could see her nails tapping against her sleeve, an idle rhythm that told me she was watching not with horror, but with satisfaction. My Uncle Frank muttered something about accidents, about dogs reacting, about Claire, probably doing something to set it off. And the words cut deeper than the bite itself. Whispers spread quickly like wildfire, catching the dry grass under the summer sun. Did she provoke it? Did she scream at the dog? Was it an accident? My vision swam the noise around me like a swarm of bees in my ears, and I realized that even as I bled, even as I fought to stay conscious, doubt was already creeping in. Lorraine knew exactly what she was doing. She had unleashed more than her dog. She had unleashed suspicion, chaos, division. Maya's cries pulled me back. I turned my head, pain lancing through my arm, and saw her small hands reaching for me, her cheeks streaked with tears. I wanted to crawl to her to hold her to promise her I was fine, but when I tried to move, fire exploded across my muscles, and I collapsed back against the blanket, my breath ripped from me. My father yelled for more towels for someone to bring something to stop the bleeding. A cousin ran inside, his hands shaking so badly, he dropped the first stack of napkins he grabbed. My Aunt Margaret bent down, pressing a dish towel to my wound, her hands trembling as blood soaked through almost immediately, the white fabric turning red in seconds. "Stay with me, Claire," she pleaded, her face ghost pale. "Don't close your eyes. You hear me? Don't you dare!" My ears rang with the sound of Brutus still snarling my father's grunts as he pinned him, the barking mixing with the terrified screams of children hiding inside the house. Someone yelled that neighbors were gathering at the fence, drawn by the noise, their faces pale as they saw the scene. The blood, the chaos, the family divided in a nightmare tableau. Mrs. Peterson from next door gasped audibly, her voice carrying, "Dear God, she's bleeding to death." Another man shouted, "I heard Lorraine say it. She told the dog to get her. I heard it clear as day, I'll testify." His words should have been a relief, but the pounding in my head made it hard to focus. I wanted to hold on to them, to clutch them like a rope, keeping me tethered to truth. But the whispers from my own relatives already chipped away at it. Did she provoke it? Did she scream? Was she unstable? I felt the weight of their doubt pressing harder than the towel on my arm. Lorraine's voice broke through again. Low, sharp, meant only for me. "Maybe they'll believe you. Maybe they won't. Either way, you're finished." The smile on her lips never faltered. It was then I noticed her eyes flicker toward the picnic table, where a carving knife still smeared with grease from slicing meat glinted in the sunlight. My heart clenched, dread pooling in my stomach. She took one step, just a subtle movement, but her hand twitched, fingers curling, as though she were about to reach for it. My father was too busy restraining the dog, his muscles straining with the effort of holding back another attack. My mother still screamed into her phone, tears streaming, her voice broken as she begged for help. No one else saw Lorraine's hand. No one else noticed the calculation in her movement. The vision of her gripping that knife, finishing what the dog had started, stabbed through my mind. Adrenaline surged, cutting through the haze of pain. With every ounce of strength left in me, I slammed my heel into the leg of the picnic table, the wood-rattled plates and glasses crashing to the ground. The knife spun, clattering into the dirt several feet away. Gasps erupted around me, voices shouting in confusion, heads whipping between me and the knife. Lorraine's mask slipped for just a second, rage flashing across her face, sharp and undeniable. She lunged, her arm outstretched, reaching for the weapon. But before she could grab it, Mark, my cousin, who had been frozen until then, grabbed her wrist, yanking her back. She shrieked, her voice guttural, nothing like the polished woman she pretended to be. She kicked, clawed, her face twisted with fury as Mark struggled to hold her down. "She's lying," Lorraine screamed, spittle flying. "She's dangerous. She set this up. You don't understand." Her words tangled into incoherence, her shrieks mingling with the dog's growls, as my father dragged Brutus toward the garage, the beast still straining to get at me. For a moment, it felt like the world was collapsing into madness. Children crying, adults shouting, neighbors calling out from beyond the fence, my blood still flowing freely. My chest heaved, each breath jagged, the edges of my vision darkening as dizziness swept over me. Lorraine twisted against Mark's grip, her eyes finding mine, burning with hatred. "You think you're safe, but this is only the beginning," she hissed, her voice raw from screaming. A chill ripped through me, deeper than the pain in my arm. My blood still poured onto the grass, but it wasn't just blood loss that made me weak. It was the knowledge that Lorraine hadn't simply attacked me with her dog. She had declared war, and she wasn't finished. Blood still pulsed through the towel pressed against my arm, as voices swirled around me. But in that haze, my mind began to slip backward, dragging me through memories I had tried for years to bury. It was not the first time Lorraine had left me bleeding, though never before had it been so literal. Growing up, she had been the self-appointed matriarch of our family, towering over every gathering with her sharp tongue and sharper opinions. She was my mother's older sister, but she wielded her authority as though it had been granted by some higher power. From the time I was little, she decided who was valuable and who was disposable, and somehow I was always placed in the latter category. I could still remember being 7 years old, holding up a drawing I had made in art class, proud of the bright colors and careful lines. Lorraine had taken it from my hands with a sweet smile that fooled the adults in the room. How lovely, she said, her voice like honey. Then, in a tone low enough for only me to hear, she whispered, "But you'll never be as talented as Rachel. Don't embarrass yourself by showing this off." Rachel, her daughter, was always the standard. Perfect grades, perfect clothes, perfect smile. I was measured against her in every way and always came up short. When I won a science fair ribbon, Lorraine laughed in front of everyone. "First place at a small school is still small potatoes," she said, clinking her glass. When I announced I wanted to be a teacher, she shook her head. "Of course you would pick something easy, something where failure doesn't matter. It suits you." My mother rarely challenged her. Sometimes she would murmur, "That's enough, Lorraine," but the words held no weight, slipping away like smoke. My father would scowl but stay silent, as though confronting his sister-in-law would fracture the fragile balance of family. And so Lorraine's words settled into me like stones one by one until I carried a weight I couldn't shake. Even in college, when I worked 2 jobs to pay tuition, she visited during a holiday and smirked, studying education. "You'll never have any real authority. You'll always be the child, the one no one listens to." She made sure everyone at the table heard. The shame burned hotter than the coffee I sipped, and no one came to my defense. When I became pregnant with Maya, I thought perhaps things would change. Motherhood was supposed to grant respect. Instead, Lorraine leaned into her role as critic with new venom. She bought expensive toys and clothes and paraded them around, telling relatives, "If I don't step in, Maya will grow up deprived. Claire can barely take care of herself, let alone a child." She said it with a laugh, but her eyes told the truth. She wasn't joking. When she babysat, she returned Maya with comments like, "She eats better with me," or "She listens when I tell her stories, maybe because I know how to handle children." Each phrase was a knife hidden in silk, small enough to dismiss if you didn't know the pattern. But by then, I knew the pattern too well. It was gaslighting refined to an art form. She would make me doubt myself in front of my own mother. "Margaret, don't you think Maya looks thin?" she would ask sweetly, patting Maya's hair. My mother would hesitate, glance at me, then shrug. "Maybe Claire's just tired." That shrug was worse than any insult. It told me that my mother believed Lorraine more than me, that my credibility was always negotiable. I began to record small things, almost without realizing it. A voicemail where Lorraine accused me of not feeding Maya enough. A text message where she called me unstable after I refused to let Maya sleep over. A video on my phone where her voice could be heard in the background muttering that I was unfit. I never showed anyone. What would be the point? They would call me paranoid. They always had. Still, I collected them quietly, tucking them away like seeds of truth I might one day need. The older Maya grew, the more obvious it became that Lorraine was trying to weave herself into the role of mother. She brought identical clothes for her, and Rachel making them pose together as though Maya were her second daughter. She whispered things into Maya's ear that made my child pull back from me at bedtime, eyes wide with confusion. "Aunt Lorraine says you get angry a lot," Maya once murmured, her small hands clutching her blanket. I froze, my throat tightening. "Who told you that?" I whispered. Maya shrugged, turning her face away. My heart broke, but what terrified me most was not the words themselves. It was the way Lorraine had slipped into the role of authority in Maya's eyes. Every comment, every whisper, every carefully chosen gift was another brick in a wall she was building between me and my daughter. And still, my family ignored it. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I caught Lorraine feeding Maya spoonfuls of pumpkin pie after I had said no dessert until dinner. When I confronted her, she laughed lightly, patting my arm. "Oh, Claire, you're too strict. She needs joy. Don't rob her of joy." The others chuckled, shaking their heads at me as though I were uptight, ungrateful. I went home that night feeling smaller than ever, as though I were the villain in my own family story. That was the pattern Lorraine perfected: humiliate me in public, whisper poison in private, and ensure that no one took me seriously when I tried to fight back. The dog attack was not the beginning. It was the culmination of decades of control, contempt, and calculation. But I hadn't realized just how far she was willing to go until 3 days before the picnic, when her carefully hidden secret slipped into my hands. A small black USB drive no bigger than my thumb tumbled from her tote bag as she turned to answer a phone call. I bent to pick it up, intending to return it. My hand froze when I saw the label scrawled in her handwriting, one word written with unsettling precision: Maya. The word on the small black USB drive stopped me cold. Maya. My daughter's name written in Lorraine's careful looping script, as though she had branded possession on the tiny piece of plastic. My heart thudded in my chest as I slipped it into my pocket, my hand trembling. She had gone upstairs to take her call, the sound of her heels clicking on the wooden steps fading, leaving me alone in the guest room with my racing thoughts. I told myself I would return it, that I should not invade her privacy, that maybe it was nothing. But why would my aunt, who had spent years undermining me as a mother, have a USB labeled with my child's name? That question gnawed at me all through dinner, all through the polite chatter, all through Lorraine's smug looks across the table. That night when Maya was asleep and my husband was in the shower, I slipped into the study and plugged the drive into my laptop. A folder appeared instantly. Special moments. My pulse quickened, my palm sweaty against the keyboard. For a fleeting second, I hoped maybe it was innocent pictures from family holidays, snapshots of birthdays. But when I clicked the first file, my stomach lurched. On the screen was Lorraine sitting on a couch I recognized as her own, leaning close to Maya. Her tone was soft, almost sing-song, but the words made bile rise in my throat. She whispered that they had secrets no one else needed to know. That special time with Aunt Lorraine was different, that Mommy would not understand. My hands shook so badly the mouse nearly slipped from my grip. The video ended with her kissing Maya's head in a way that looked rehearsed, staged like she was documenting closeness for some future purpose. I clicked another. This one showed her guiding Maya through a toy box filled with dolls and clothes I had never seen, each one labeled with Maya's name on masking tape. She told her this was her special place, where she would always be loved, where no one could ever take her away. My vision blurred with hot tears. I slammed the laptop closed, my breath ragged, my heart hammering. I wanted to scream, to wake my husband, to call my mother, and demand she see the truth. But a voice inside me whispered the familiar refrain: "No one will believe you. They never do." And that voice wasn't wrong. The next morning I tried. I told my mother in a trembling voice about what I had seen, about the whispers, about the room of toys. She sighed heavily, the sound dripping with exhaustion. "Claire, you are too sensitive. Lorraine has always loved Maya. She spoils her, yes, but that is not a crime. You need to stop inventing problems where there are none." Her dismissal stung like acid poured on an open wound. I hung up feeling foolish, yet the memory of those videos clawed at me, demanding I not ignore them. In the days that followed, I began noticing details I had overlooked. Twice, Maya came home with toys I had never bought, clutching dolls and stuffed animals that she said Aunt Lorraine gave her. Once I found her in the bedroom hugging a jacket, a small purple one I had never seen, that Lorraine claimed she had gifted. When I asked Maya where it came from, she only shrugged, whispering that Aunt Lorraine brought it when she visited. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she turned her face to the wall and whispered, "I don't want Aunt Lorraine to watch me anymore." My breath caught my hand, frozen mid-stroke of her hair. I pressed gently, asking why, but she clamped her lips shut and refused to answer, her small shoulders curling inward. That night I could not sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying the videos in my mind. Lorraine's lips moving against Maya's ear, her voice dripping poison, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. My husband noticed my distraction. "What's wrong with you lately?" he asked. His brow furrowed as he placed a hand on my shoulder. "You hardly eat, you hardly sleep. You're scaring me." I shook my head, forcing a smile that fooled no one. "It's just work stress." But the truth was gnawing me from the inside out. I considered deleting the files, thinking maybe if I erased them, the horror would fade. Maybe I could pretend none of it was real. But something stopped me. Some deep instinct told me to hold on to them, to keep them safe. I tucked the USB into the back of my desk drawer, hidden under old bills, my hands sweating as I closed the drawer and pressed my forehead against the wood. I whispered a promise to myself that I would confront Lorraine soon, that I would never let her near Maya again. But the promise was drowned in the chaos of preparing for the family picnic that weekend. I baked a dish packed paper plates, tried to lose myself in the routine. I told myself I could push it aside for one day, that nothing would happen in broad daylight surrounded by family. Still, unease gnawed at me as we drove to the park. The sky was impossibly blue, the sun relentless, the air shimmering with heat. Maya hummed in the back seat, swinging her legs, her innocence a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. When we arrived, I spotted Lorraine immediately. She was at the center of it all, as always, commanding attention with her smile, her jewelry glinting, her hand wrapped around Brutus's leash. The dog sat calmly, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on me the moment I stepped into view. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile, waving to relatives setting up plates on the blanket. I tried to focus on the sizzle of burgers, the laughter of children, the chatter of cousins. For a while it worked. The air smelled of barbecue. The sound of soda cans popping punctuated the hum of conversation, and Maya tugged at my hand, asking for a juice box. I almost convinced myself it would be fine. But then I caught Lorraine bending to adjust Brutus's collar, her lips brushing close to his ear. It was only a second, a flicker, but I recognized the posture, the whisper, the deliberate intimacy. It was the same way she had leaned close to Maya in those videos. A shiver skated down my spine despite the oppressive heat. I turned away quickly, trying to laugh at something my cousin said, trying to steady my breath. But the dread coiled tighter, a snake waiting to strike. And when Lorraine's sharp voice later sliced through the picnic, commanding Brutus, with a single word I realized the USB had not been a warning of something in the future. It had been a countdown, and time had just run out. The wail of sirens cut through the summer air just as my vision dimmed at the edges. I clung to consciousness, clutching the blood-soaked towel against my arm. Hearing the frantic voices around me blend into a cacophony of panic. Neighbors crowded the fence, some shouting that they had seen Lorraine give the order, others murmuring doubts. When the paramedics burst through the gate, their calm efficiency was like a knife through the chaos. One dropped to his knees beside me, pressing gauze against the gaping bite, his voice steady as he told me to breathe slowly, that I was safe now that I was losing blood. But he had me. My father finally released Brutus into the hands of animal control, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temples. His arms streaked with my blood. The dog's snarled muscles coiled as the officer slipped a thick loop around his neck, dragging him toward the truck. Even then, the beast's eyes locked on me, his teeth still stained red. His growls muffled only when the truck door slammed shut. Lorraine erupted as they led the dog away, her voice sharp and shrill. "You cannot take him. He is my trained companion. He only acted because she provoked him. This is all a setup." She paced like a caged animal, hands gesturing wildly, eyes blazing. Yet when the officers approached her asking if she had commanded the dog, her tone shifted, instantly smooth and practiced. Of course not. It was a misunderstanding. Claire has always been dramatic, everyone knows that. She probably screamed and startled him. You know how sensitive these animals can be. The sheer audacity of her calm denial, while blood still streamed from my body, made bile rise in my throat. I tried to sit up to tell them the truth, but the paramedics pressed me down firmly, strapping me to a stretcher. My mother clutched my hand, tears streaming, still sobbing into her phone, even as she followed us toward the ambulance. As they lifted me, I caught sight of Maya's face through the blur of flashing lights. Her cheeks wet with tears, her small arms reaching toward me as she cried, "Mommy, don't go!" The image seared into me, sharper than the pain in my arm. The ride to the hospital blurred together in flashes of fluorescent lights and clipped voices. The paramedics kept pressing gauze, checking my pulse, murmuring that I needed stitches, antibiotics, that blood loss was dangerous, but I would survive. I drifted in and out, catching fragments of my mother arguing with an officer outside, swearing that Lorraine had done it on purpose, her voice cracking under the weight of years of denial finally breaking. But then another relative's voice cut in, muffled but insistent, saying, maybe it was an accident. Maybe Claire overreacted. Maybe Lorraine was telling the truth. Even from the stretcher, I could feel the doubt gathering like storm clouds. At the hospital, the antiseptic air stung my nose as doctors swarmed me, needles piercing my veins, voices counting stitches as they pulled my torn flesh together with thread. The pain was excruciating each tug, a reminder of the teeth that had shredded me. I bit my lip until it bled, refusing to scream, staring at the ceiling tiles as if they could anchor me to sanity. Hours passed before the room finally quieted, the adrenaline fading, leaving me trembling and hollow. That was when Detective Maria Hale entered her presence, steady, her eyes sharp, but kind. She pulled up a chair, introduced herself as lead investigator, and said she needed my account of what happened. My throat was raw, my body weak, but I forced myself to speak. I told her everything, my voice shaking as I recounted the command I had heard, the cold smile on Lorraine's face, the whispers that this was only the beginning. I told her about the USB, about the videos, about the labeled dolls, and the whispers into Maya's ear. Her pen scratched quickly across the page, her jaw tightening as she listened. When I finished, she asked the question that made my pulse spike. "Do you still have the drive?" I nodded weakly. "It is in my desk drawer at home." She stood decisive. "We will secure it immediately." Relief and dread mingled inside me. If the videos were retrieved, my paranoia would be validated. But the truth would also be undeniable, no longer a secret I could tuck away. Within hours, the drive was in police custody. That evening, Detective Hale returned, her expression grim but steady. She told me forensics had already confirmed multiple files, metadata intact, created on the nights Lorraine had babysat. Nothing tampered. The evidence was damning. Still, my relief was short-lived because even as I lay there bandaged and stitched, Lorraine was already striking back. My husband arrived pale and furious, holding a thick envelope delivered to our home. Inside was a letter from Lorraine's attorney claiming I had fabricated evidence that I was mentally unstable, jealous of my aunt, and that I had staged the attack to ruin her reputation. The words felt like another attack this time, with paper and ink instead of teeth, but no less vicious. My husband slammed his fist against the hospital wall, his voice breaking with anger. "She is trying to bury you, but she won't win." I wanted to believe him, but memories of every time my family had doubted me crept in, wrapping around my throat like a noose. Even now, some of them were posting on social media suggesting the story was exaggerated, that maybe I had panicked and blamed Lorraine unfairly. Clips from the picnic already circulated, grainy footage of me screaming, of the dog lunging, of relatives shouting. The command, "Get her," was faint, almost drowned in the noise, and debate raged online. Some said they heard it. Others said it was just the wind, just imagination. My name spread through the town like wildfire, strangers dissecting my trauma as though it were entertainment. In the sterile hospital bed, I felt the walls close in. My reputation, my career as a teacher, my ability to protect my child, all of it was hanging in the balance. Lorraine had unleashed the dog, but worse, she had unleashed suspicion, the kind that could poison every circle of my life. As the detective gathered her notes and prepared to leave, she paused at the door, her voice low and certain. "This is bigger than just a dog attack. Lorraine planned something, and we will find out what." Her words should have steadied me, but all I felt was a cold shiver as I remembered Lorraine's final whisper in the chaos of the picnic. "This is only the beginning." 2 days after the attack, Detective Hale called me back to the station. My stitches still pulled painfully every time I moved my arm, but I forced myself into the passenger seat of my husband's car. Maya in the back with her crayons too quiet for a 6-year-old, who used to hum constantly. At the precinct, Detective Hale ushered us into a gray room with humming fluorescent lights and a table scattered with photographs. Her eyes were sharp, her movements deliberate. She slid the first set of photos across to me. They showed the contents of Lorraine's laptop seized under a warrant. Typed notes in her meticulous font filled the pages. Lines that chilled me to the bone. "Document Claire losing temper with Maya." "Record crying audio." "Create file of unsafe environment." "Present to court if needed." My hands shook as I scanned them. It was not paranoia, it was strategy. My aunt, the woman who had stood in our kitchen countless times sipping coffee as though she belonged, had built a legal plan to erase me as a mother. She had weaponized her profession, crafting an argument with precision. Except the opponent was not another attorney. It was me, and the prize was my daughter. My stomach clenched, bile rising. But before I could speak, Hale laid down another set of photographs. This time they were from a storage facility on the edge of town. My breath caught the moment I saw the first image. A small twin bed made up with Disney princess sheets. Shelves lined with stuffed animals. Plastic bins stacked against the wall, each labeled carefully in thick black marker. Maya's name written over and over. I recognized the jacket on one shelf, the purple one Maya had once carried home, and insisted Aunt Lorraine gave her. Another box contained dolls I had never purchased, but had seen in Maya's hands after babysitting visits. Another bin held tiny shoes-folded clothes that I knew had gone missing from my laundry baskets. Even drawings from Maya's preschool, the kind that should have been taped proudly to our fridge, were stacked neatly in folders. My vision blurred, tears burning my eyes as the horror settled in. Lorraine had been building a life for Maya, a secret room prepared as though she were planning to move her in. I whispered, my voice cracking. She was going to take her. Detective Hale nodded grimly. That is our theory. The evidence shows clear preparation. Weekly visit surveillance footage of her carrying bags. The metadata on her devices matches the dates. This was not impulse. This was calculation. My husband's jaw clenched. His fists balled on the table. How do we stop her from ever getting near our daughter again? His voice shook with restrained fury. Hale's tone was steady but carried weight. We are already pursuing aggravated assault conspiracy to kidnap and child endangerment. But this will not be quick. She knows the system. She will fight. The words landed heavy, but beneath the fear, a flicker of resolve sparked. I had spent years doubting myself, allowing Lorraine's whispers to make me small. Now, I had proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Still, the investigation pressed deeper. Forensics recovered deleted audio files from Lorraine's hard drive, manipulated clips of Maya crying stripped of context, meant to sound like neglect. Notes indicated she intended to present them as evidence that I was abusive, that Maya was unsafe with me. Each revelation peeled back another layer of her deceit, another knife I hadn't known she held. The community buzzed with rumor. Neighbors who had once waved politely now looked at me with a mix of pity and suspicion. Social media exploded with debate. The video from the picnic spread widely, grainy but horrifying. My scream, the dog's lunge, Lorraine's faint voice commanding. Comment sections filled with strangers arguing whether I was the victim or the villain. Some said Lorraine was dangerous. Others claimed family disputes shouldn't involve police. My name became a hashtag in our small town, my face recognized in grocery stores, where whispers trailed after me like shadows. At school, the storm struck harder. 2 days after the attack, the principal called me into his office. His expression was tight, his words rehearsed. The district had decided to place me on administrative leave until further notice. Not a punishment, he said quickly, but a matter of safety of public perception. My legs felt weak as I carried a box of supplies from my classroom, avoiding the eyes of parents waiting in the pickup line. Teaching had been my purpose, my anchor. And now it was stripped from me because of Lorraine's violence. That evening, another letter arrived from her attorneys. This one filed as a civil suit against me for defamation. The language was vicious, describing me as unstable, jealous, manipulative. The words blurred as I read them, my hands trembling, my breath shallow. She was not satisfied with drawing blood. She wanted to bury me under paper, to strangle me with the very system she had mastered. My husband slammed his fist on the counter, shouting that she would not win, but the fear coiled tight inside me. It was not just my body under attack now. It was my identity, my livelihood, my ability to keep my child safe. And still, my mother clung to denial. When I told her about the storage unit, she snapped at me over the phone, her voice sharp and brittle. Maybe she kept those things because she loves Maya. Maybe you are twisting this. Maybe you are jealous. The words cut deeper than the knife Lorraine had reached for at the picnic. My own mother could not or would not see the truth staring her in the face. For the first time, I felt the full weight of being alone. Yet even as my world fractured, Detective Hale pressed forward, assembling evidence, building a case. She told me the district attorney had assigned Daniel Ruiz a seasoned prosecutor, with a reputation for being relentless. He would pursue Lorraine with every tool available. Her words were meant to reassure, but they carried a warning too. This will not be quick, and it will not be gentle. Prepare yourself. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, the stitches in my arm throbbing, Maya stirred from a nightmare, climbing into bed beside me, her small body trembling. She whispered, "Will Aunt Lorraine come back?" I held her close, pressing my cheek to her hair, tasting salt from both our tears. "No," I promised, though the word felt fragile. "She will never hurt us again." In the stillness, I realized promises would not be enough. Evidence had to speak louder than whispers. The courtroom would be the battlefield, and Lorraine would fight like a cornered predator. The thought chilled me, but beneath it, a resolve hardened. I would not be silent anymore. As the first subpoenas were served and the trial date set, the storm gathered. And in my gut, I knew the picnic had been nothing but the opening move. The real war was about to begin. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and old wood, a mix that clung to my nerves as I walked through the heavy double doors. My arm was stiff beneath the sleeve of my blouse, the scar throbbing with each heartbeat, as though it remembered on its own. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my palms slick with sweat, my chest tight as I forced myself to look forward. Across the room, Lorraine entered in a tailored navy suit, her posture perfect, her chin lifted with defiance. She wore a sling on her arm from where Mark had restrained her at the picnic, a visible prop meant to paint her as the victim. Her eyes flicked to me, cool and venomous, a silent message passing between us. "You are nothing." The judge called the session to order, the gavel echoing like a gunshot through the chamber. Daniel Ruiz, the prosecutor, rose with steady authority. He laid out the case, his voice measured but powerful, describing a deliberate attack at a family picnic, a command given to a trained dog, a victim left bleeding in front of her child, and a calculated plan uncovered through digital evidence. His words hung heavy, drawing the eyes of the jury toward me, toward Maya, sitting quietly with my husband in the gallery, her small legs swinging nervously beneath the bench. When Lorraine's attorney stood, his voice was smooth as silk, weaving a story of sibling rivalry and jealousy. He painted me as unstable, bitter, resentful of Lorraine's success, and desperate for attention. He claimed the dog had acted on instinct, that I had startled him, that the USB was planted, that the storage unit was nothing more than a place for Lorraine's donations. He smiled at the jury as though it were all so obvious. My stomach churned, but I sat still, my hands clasped, determined not to give him ammunition. The first witness was Mrs. Peterson, our neighbor. Her voice trembled as she described hearing Lorraine's command, seeing the dog surge forward, hearing my scream. The defense pressed her, suggesting she had misheard over the noise of the grill, but she held firm, her eyes flashing toward Lorraine. "I know what I heard," she said. "Get her." Other neighbors followed, each recounting what they saw and heard. Their cumulative weight pressed heavily on the defense. Then Ruiz presented the video captured by another neighbor's phone. The room went silent as the grainy footage flickered across the courtroom screen. There I was, sitting on the blanket, Maya beside me. Lorraine's voice cut through, faint but clear enough, the dog leaping my body, toppling, blood visible even in the pixelated image. Played frame by frame, the footage showed her mouth forming the word unmistakably. "Get her." My chest tightened as I relived it, but I forced myself not to look away. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The defense objected, claiming the video lacked clarity, but the judge overruled. Ruiz's voice was steady. This was not imagination. This was deliberate. The storage unit evidence came next. Photographs filled the screen. Princess sheets, dolls lined neatly, bins labeled with Maya's name, jackets, and drawings, taken from my home. Gasps again, jurors leaning forward. Ruiz read aloud the receipts signed in Lorraine's name, dated months before the attack. Surveillance footage showed her visiting weekly hauling bags. The defense claimed she was storing donations for charity, that labeling items with Maya's name was coincidence. Ruiz countered with fingerprint analysis, her prints on every object, every surface. Coincidence does not explain stolen clothes, toothbrushes, preschool drawings. Coincidence does not build a bedroom prepared for a child who does not live there. My breath caught my eyes stinging as I stared at the images. My daughter's life had been stolen piece by piece, twisted into a grotesque shrine. Ruiz then called Mark, my cousin. His voice shook as he described restraining Lorraine when she lunged for the knife. The defense tried to push him, asking if maybe he misinterpreted her movement, but Mark snapped, his anger breaking through. She was going for that knife. I saw it. I stopped her. His outburst silenced the room, his sincerity undeniable. My father testified next, his voice steady, recounting how he restrained the dog, how he saw Lorraine's face filled with intent. My mother was called reluctantly. She twisted her hands, her voice wavering, torn between daughters. She claimed she did not believe Lorraine capable, but under Ruiz's gentle questioning, she broke. Tears streamed as she whispered, "Maybe I did not want to see. Maybe I was blind." The courtroom air grew heavier. Finally, Detective Hale took the stand. Calm and precise. She explained the metadata, how the files matched nights. Lorraine babysat, how the USB had been hidden, how the deleted audio clips had been manipulated to sound like neglect. Jurors scribbled notes furiously, their faces hardening. Then came Lorraine's turn. She rose with confidence, her voice clear, her performance polished. She painted me as unstable, claimed I had planted the USB, fabricated evidence, manipulated neighbors. She said I was envious of her career, her stability, her role in the family. For a fleeting moment listening to her, I felt that old tug, the weight of her manipulation, the possibility that people might believe her. But then Ruiz rose for cross-examination. He walked slowly, deliberate, holding up a photograph of the storage unit. "If this was your personal space, why label bins with your niece's name?" Lorraine faltered. He pressed further, showing her receipts with her signature fingerprints across every item. "If Claire fabricated this, why are your prints everywhere?" Her composure cracked. Her voice stumbled. Ruiz ended by replaying the video, Lorraine's voice commanding, "Get her!" The silence after was crushing. The judge's gavel echoed as the jury was dismissed to deliberate. Hours stretched into eternity, my breath shallow, my pulse racing as I held Maya's hand tightly. Finally, the jurors filed back, faces grim. The foreperson stood, voice steady. "We find the defendant Lorraine Parker guilty on all counts." The charges echoed through the chamber: aggravated assault, conspiracy to kidnap, child endangerment, evidence tampering. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, revoked her law license, and issued a lifetime no-contact order with minors, including Maya. Gasps filled the room. My mother sobbed into her hands. My father's jaw tightened. His face aged a decade in a moment. Lorraine's expression twisted into fury and disbelief. She turned to me as deputies took her arms, her voice hissing. "This is not over." But the clang of the cell door waiting for her told me otherwise. Relief crashed over me so hard I nearly collapsed. Maya's small arms wrapped around my waist as she whispered, "Mommy, are we safe now?" And for the first time in months, I answered with certainty, "Yes, baby, we are safe." Yet even as I spoke, I felt the weight of scars deeper than flesh, scars that would take years to heal. And I wondered what pieces of my family would remain when the dust finally settled. After the verdict, the air felt lighter, but my body carried the storm still. The stitches in my arm healed into a jagged scar, an angry red reminder of teeth and betrayal. But the deeper wounds were not visible on skin. They lived in my home, in my daughter's frightened eyes, in the silence that stretched across family dinners that no longer happened. Lorraine was locked away, sentenced, her law license stripped, but she lingered in the shadows of every conversation. My mother called often, her voice brittle, repeating that she could not reconcile the woman she loved with the monster the jury had seen. She wept, saying she had failed us all, that her blindness had been a form of betrayal. Sometimes she begged forgiveness. Other times she clung to fragments of denial, insisting Lorraine must have snapped under pressure, that it could not have been her intention. Each time I listened, torn between fury and pity, but I no longer allowed her words to define me. I set boundaries. Visits were supervised, calls cut short when the tone shifted. For once, I chose myself and my daughter first. My father was different. He stood firm by my side, driving me to medical appointments, fixing the backyard fence as though repairing wood could mend the fracture in our family. He rarely spoke of Lorraine, but I caught him staring into the distance, his jaw tight, his soldier's face cracking only when he thought I could not see. Maya began therapy with a child specialist, a kind woman who guided her through memories too heavy for words. At first, Maya drew only dark scribbles hiding her face in her arms. Then one afternoon, she painted a picture of our house with three figures holding hands beneath the sun. It was not perfect, but it was a glimpse of healing. She clung to me at night, waking from nightmares, whispering that Aunt Lorraine might return. I reassured her, each time repeating that Lorraine could never hurt her again. At first, my words felt fragile, but over time I saw her shoulders relax, her sleep deepen, her drawings brighten. My husband and I attended sessions together too. The therapist challenged us to rebuild trust not only with each other, but with ourselves. She reminded me that ignoring my instincts had allowed Lorraine to get too close, that dismissing unease had put us in danger. From then on, we created rules, clear and strict. No one outside of us would have unsupervised time with Maya. Play dates, family visits, babysitting, all subject to boundaries. Some relatives complained that I was overreacting, that I was paranoid. I no longer cared. Safety came first. We installed cameras throughout the house, every corner covered. Each month, we swept the rooms with a detector to ensure no hidden devices lingered. It became routine, like locking doors or paying bills. Maya even helped her laughter spilling out when the detector beeped harmlessly. It was her way of regaining power. The community slowly shifted. At first, whispers followed me in the grocery store, eyes darting toward my scar neighbors, debating whether I was a victim or a liar. But as time passed, as new scandals emerged, the noise faded. Some stopped me to apologize, admitting they had doubted me, admitting they had whispered cruel things. Others avoided me altogether, unable to face their own complicity. I stopped caring about their judgment. My classroom eventually reopened to me. The district lifted my suspension, issuing a quiet apology. Walking back into the room felt surreal. My students cheered, some hugging me tightly. I taught math problems and read stories with a deeper gratitude, aware of how close I had come to losing it all. Still, the scar on my arm throbbed when I lifted the chalk, a constant reminder of how fragile safety can be. At home, life began to stitch itself back together in small ways. Maya joined an art class painting flowers and houses, filling the fridge with color instead of darkness. One evening, she drew a puppy beside our family. Weeks later, we adopted a gentle rescue dog. Maya named him Lucky. Watching her hug him tightly, laughter bubbling from her chest, felt like reclaiming joy stolen by Brutus's shadow. My mother attended a court-mandated trauma support group. Slowly, she began to admit how her favoritism had blinded her, how she had ignored warning signs, how she had dismissed me when I pleaded for help. She cried when she visited, apologizing over and over. The trust was not fully restored, but small steps mattered. My father remained steady, driving Maya to school, building shelves for her new art supplies. His quiet strength anchoring us. Letters from Lorraine came, but they never reached me. The court intercepted them, sealed them, stored them as evidence. She filed appeals, each denied. Her name became less of a threat, more of a signature on legal documents I refused to read. Months turned into a year. Life was not perfect, but it was ours again. Dinner at the table, laughter during movies, Maya running through the yard with Lucky chasing her. Sometimes she stopped looking up at me with serious eyes, asking, "We are safe, right, Mommy?" And each time I answered with conviction, "Yes, sweetheart, we are safe." Yet even in safety, I carried the lessons carved into me. I learned that family could be the sharpest blade, that blood ties did not guarantee loyalty, that boundaries were not selfish but necessary. I began speaking at parent meetings, telling my story carefully, leaving out the darkest details but keeping the truth intact. I told them to trust their instincts, to listen to their children, to never dismiss unease as paranoia. Some parents cried, others thanked me. Each time I spoke, I felt a piece of power return. My scar remained, but it became more than a reminder of violence. It became a symbol of survival. Maya flourished slowly. She laughed louder, painted brighter, slept deeper. She grew into a child who whispered her fears instead of burying them. She knew now that silence was dangerous, that her voice mattered. And in teaching her that, I began to believe it myself. Lorraine was behind bars, her influence severed, but the echo of her cruelty lingered. It no longer controlled me, but it shaped me. And as I tucked Maya into bed one evening, her small body curled against Lucky, she handed me a drawing from school. It showed our family holding hands, Lucky beside us, a bright sun overhead. At the bottom, written in shaky letters, were 3 words: "Home is safe." I pressed the paper to my chest, tears blurring my vision. That phrase was more valuable than any verdict, any court order. It was proof that healing was possible, that even after blood and betrayal, we had reclaimed what mattered most. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, I would run my fingers across the scar on my arm and feel the memory rise sharp as the day Brutus's teeth tore through me. But instead of trembling, I would remind myself that scars were proof of survival. They told a story, one I had not chosen, but one I had endured. For months after the trial, I woke in the dark, drenched in sweat, hearing phantom growls, feeling phantom pressure of jaws locked around me. Therapy taught me to breathe through it, to ground myself in the present, to whisper that I was safe. And slowly, the nightmares faded. Not completely, but enough that I could close my eyes without fear of being consumed. What lingered more than fear was the lesson. Family had not been my shield. Family had been the blade. Lorraine's cruelty had been sharpened by years of favoritism, denial, and silence. My mother's blindness, my relatives' whispers, even the community's doubts, all had played a role in the wound. It would have been easy to let bitterness rot me, to let hatred fester until I was no different from her. But I chose something else. I chose to turn the pain outward, to use it as warning, as protection for others. I spoke openly at schools, at parent groups, even at small church gatherings. Each time I stood at a podium with my scar hidden beneath a sleeve, I told the truth. I told them how gaslighting begins small, how control seeps in quietly, how cruelty wears a mask of care. I told them that if they felt unease, they should never silence it, that if a child whispered discomfort, they should listen as though their life depended on it. Because sometimes it does. People listened. Some cried. Some nodded with grim recognition. A few approached me after confessing that my words had given them courage to set boundaries, to step away from toxic relatives, to trust their gut. Those moments gave my suffering meaning. If my story could protect even one child, even one parent, then Lorraine had not won. My daughter grew stronger too. Maya's laughter returned, fully bubbling through the house as she painted bright pictures and chased Lucky across the yard. She still asked sometimes if Aunt Lorraine would ever come back. And each time I told her no, that laws and locks and distance stood between us and danger. Her shoulders relaxed a little more with each reassurance. One evening, she drew a picture of herself holding Lucky's leash. "He protects me now," she said proudly. And in that moment, I realized she was reclaiming her own power, reshaping fear into trust. My husband and I rebuilt too. The trial had strained us, the sleepless nights, the legal bills, the constant tension. But we emerged more united. He reminded me daily that I was strong, that I had not just survived, but fought with intelligence and courage. Together, we created a home that was not perfect, but was safe. A home with rules and boundaries and laughter. A home where Maya could grow without shadows. As for my extended family, fractures remained. Some cousins still whispered that I had overreacted, that airing family disputes in court was disgraceful. Others admitted privately that they had always feared Lorraine, that her mask had cracked at last. My mother kept attending therapy, slowly peeling back layers of denial. She apologized often, sometimes too often, as though words could erase years of disbelief. I accepted her apologies, but I also kept my boundaries. I learned that forgiveness does not mean access. I could love her while protecting myself. That balance became my quiet rebellion against the toxic patterns that had shaped us for so long. Lorraine's name faded over time, no longer whispered in every corner of town. She became just another inmate, her appeals denied, her influence severed. But for me, she would always be the shadow that taught me the value of light. I no longer feared her, but I honored the lesson she forced upon me. 1 year after the verdict, I was invited to speak at a school assembly about resilience. Standing before parents and teachers, I ended with words that had become my mantra: trust your gut, set boundaries, never ignore the quiet warnings. Applause filled the hall, but what mattered most was the relief I saw in the eyes of those who realized they were not alone. That evening at home, Maya handed me another drawing. It showed our family holding hands, lucky at our feet, the sun high above. At the bottom, she had written in her careful letters, "Home is safe." I taped it to the fridge beside her earlier drawing, tears blurring my vision. That phrase was more valuable than any verdict, more powerful than any sentence. It was proof that healing was possible, proof that even after betrayal, after blood and fear, we could rebuild. The scar on my arm would never fade, nor would the memories. But I did not want them to. They were reminders not of weakness, but of survival. Of a battle fought in the open, where truth triumphed over lies. Of a mother who chose to fight not just for herself, but for her child. And in that choice, I found strength greater than any I had known. The family picnic that began with laughter and ended in blood had been the end of one story. But it was also the beginning of another. A story of resilience, of boundaries, of chosen family. A story where my daughter's safety was not negotiable, where my voice was no longer silenced, where justice, though late, had finally arrived. So when people asked how I survived, I told them this: blood ties do not define love, boundaries do, and I would never again apologize for drawing the line.